Welcome to INB Tribe on YouTube.
Smack it! Oh my gosh, he's absolutely right. Subscribe to us on YouTube at INB Tribe.
That's right. You can do it. Do it now. Don't make me smack him again.
Right, please.
So, how far out have you been traveling to do you have a service area, or how far are you willing to go as part of the business? Or
well, the business is. So what I've done in the past, I had this business for 16 years, and I sold the business this past fall with the intention of not doing any more inspections. But since I've kind of explained that to people and started doing more education, I'm actually getting more requests to do inspections since I sold the business. So it's kind of funny though, like the couple that I sold the business to, Bree and David Clevenger, they worked for me for several years, and they primarily wanted the new construction side of the business. So they don't really care if I continue doing consulting and education work, and that was actually kind of part of the sales agreement. But as far as how far do I go, in general, it's within an hour drive or so, but most of it's like Metro Louisville, Southern Indiana. The nice thing about this business is it's really a knowledge-based business. It is also like a diagnostic-based business, but a lot of what I do is diagnosing issues kind of remotely before I even get to the house. So there's some things that I can ask up front. There's some things I can do online to try to do my homework before I even get to the house. And I can uncover quite a bit of issues before I even set foot on the house. So what I'm really trying to do right now more is...
So the material... So I'm so sorry, Eric. So the materials are public knowledge? Or do you just have the institutional knowledge of construction style for a particular area? I know we all do, but is that kind of how you're able to do a pre-assessment before you even go out?
So in general, houses are built the same pretty much everywhere. There's a little bit different nuances between the framing styles and the way that they're insulated and some flashing requirements and things like that. But in general, once you understand how a house is constructed and the time period of when that house is built, then you can basically say, okay, if you have a 1.5-story house that was built in St. Matthews in the 1950s or something, then I know that it's going to have knee walls facing attic space on the second floor. It's going to probably only have one heating cooling system that's located in the basement. There's not going to be any returns on the second floor. Like there's just common issues that were prevalent during certain building eras, right? So based on those building eras and the type of house construction that you have, I can quickly kind of get to, like, here's the common things that I'm going to find when I get there. And so just by asking questions before I get there, it can kind of eliminate some time finding out on site. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, I definitely appreciate it. And so what we want to do is bring everybody else in.
Yeah.
And I'm Milton Ali.
And I'm Hampton Scurlock.
And we want to welcome you to the Investor Tribe podcast.
Yeah, today we're fortunate enough to be joined by Eric George. So Eric's a former CREA president and a skilled building science-focused inspector and active real estate investor here in Louisville, Kentucky. So he's a friend of mine. He's got extensive knowledge and multiple certifications. He specializes in uncovering and addressing a wide range of building performance issues, from high utility bills and indoor air quality concerns to moisture management. So he's and HVAC performance as well. So he does quite a bit. So his expertise includes certifications in infrared thermometry, home energy ratings.
Say that 3 times fast. Right.
The home energy rating service, or the HERS rating, blower door diagnostics, and fire and water damage restoration, among others. So we want to, Eric's got a hands-on approach. He combines technical expertise with practical investment strategies. He does affordable college housing. I don't know if you're still doing some of that.
I still have a couple left.
Still a couple left,
Yep.
okay. So maybe we'll talk about that today, some of the stories and expertise and if you got any guidance for anybody wanting to get into that, or should they avoid it, we'll touch on that as well.
Yeah.
So, but thanks so much for coming out today, Eric.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
And,
Thank you.
Tell us a little about your company and what exactly you do, and so you drive within an hour of here. So
I have several small businesses, but the inspection business is really, like I was saying before, it's more of an education-based business now. It was like I come out to your house, I do home energy ratings on new construction or energy audits on existing homes, and I still will do the energy audits. I don't do that many anymore. I'm really more focused on educating homeowners and tradesmen and real estate professionals on the underlying causes of home comfort problems, of indoor air quality issues, moisture issues, why do things grow mold and rot out? Like all these things that, investors are generally good with numbers, right? They're good at finding deals. They're good at like, hey, it should cost X amount to fix this house up, and then it should be worth X amount afterwards, and I can rent it for this. But frankly, a lot of real estate investors don't understand building construction. They don't understand the building science behind it. And most homeowners, frankly, don't have a clue either. So I'm trying to bring this knowledge to the forefront and make it more accessible for everybody, really, because I don't want to be the only person that knows this. I mean, it's served me well, but I'm not going to advance anything in this world unless I get this knowledge out there. So that's kind of my point right now.
Gotcha. And so what are some of the most common issues you uncover when it comes to, say, residential or commercial, but let's just kind of go into energy audits just for residential, because I'm certain that there are some challenges there and some things that you can point out. I know that we can kind of point out the obvious, but what are some things that you notice that are in those audits?
So in general, the biggest thing that I find that are problems from a comfort standpoint, from an air quality standpoint, from a high utility bill standpoint, they're all generally go back to air leakage in houses and some form of duct leakage. And so if you can find the places where air is leaking in and out of your house, you're also going to find places where moisture and dust and pollen and all this other stuff from outside makes its way into your house. So, we get a lot of calls in Kentucky historically for moisture issues because it's so humid here in the summertime. And one of the big problems that we see is people installing air conditioners that are way too big for the house, for what's called the cooling load for the house. So if you install, if your house is 1,000 square feet, it might need a 2-ton air conditioner or something. It might get a 3-ton air conditioner. And so
I've been trying to tell people this. I've been trying to tell people this for years.
Yeah.
And I'm a real estate agent, and so I'm selling homes, I'm helping people with homes, and I cannot tell you how many like 1,200 square foot homes have like a 3-ton
or 4-ton
or 4-ton system, and then wondering why you're having some of these issues that are in there. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't want to start assigning blame in that space. Maybe you can speak to that.
We can certainly talk about it.
But I definitely, that fires me up because I'm thinking there has to be a disconnect.
Yeah, so kind of educating people on these myths. There's a lot of like myths and misconceptions about building science, insulation, heating, cooling systems, windows, and so trying to educate people more on like what the reality is behind that stuff. So, when you're putting in an air conditioner, it needs to be sized according to what's called the heating and cooling load. Your heating and cooling system is sized to the heating and cooling load of the house. That takes into account how leaky it is. That takes into account how much insulation is in the walls and ceilings and floors and all that kind of stuff. But most heating and cooling contractors don't take the time to do that load. So they'll say, well, if there's a 3-ton system there now, I'm just going to replace it with another 3-ton system because if it was working before, it should be working again. Or they'll say, well, the homeowner's calling me because they're uncomfortable. The second floor is hotter than the first floor, so instead of the 2-ton air conditioner, I'm going to put in a 4-ton because bigger is better, right?
Oh.
They're thinking that it gives it more capacity, but what it ends up doing is it short cycles. It doesn't run long enough to pull the moisture out of the air because one of the primary functions of an air conditioner is to dehumidify the air. In addition to reducing the temperature of the air, it's pulling that moisture out of the air. So if you install air conditioners that are too big for your house, they'll only run for 5 or 10 minutes at a time before it satisfies the thermostat, but then it doesn't run long enough to actually pull that moisture out of the air. So if you have a client, if it's your personal house, if it's a rental property, and they have like really high humidity in the summertime, the 3 things that I would look at are how can I reduce air leakage in the house? how could it's like in an attic or in a crawl well, divide that by, it's a 40. Today, houses that are built, if it's really well air sealed and insulated, you can put probably, a ton to a ton and a half in a 2,000 square foot house, if it's installed properly, and it should work perfectly fine. But different styles of houses for different time periods, different types of construction lend to these kind of different problems. So the course that I made is called Home Comfort Advisors. It's primarily targeted towards homeowners, but it's also completely applicable to real estate investors and tradesmen. So that's really kind of the focus of that course.
Gotcha. Well, that's interesting. You talked about a 1 or 1.5 ton system running a whole 2,000 square foot house. But I heard the same thing too. The 400 to 500 per square feet. But and I've seen it firsthand. Some of the service technicians. Oh, it's in there. They don't want to do the numbers.
They don't know how to do the numbers.
They don't know how to do the numbers, so they're just going on with what's there.
So let's solve world hunger right now. So let's so you purchase we're going to be area agnostic, okay? Because people watch us everywhere.
Sure.
Cape Cod and a Midwestern city.
Yep.
And that construction style lends to difficulty when it comes to ductwork going into the upper level. And how do I reconcile that without necessarily daisy chaining some ductwork together to kind of satisfy an inspector, not you, but satisfy just that other inspector? But how do I work that? Because the thoughts over time has been that it is difficult to push the cold air up into the the upstairs unit, which is becoming way more livable.
Yeah.
That people are using them as primary suites now. So how do I reconcile that? I'm in a house. It's moderately. It's not. It's the area is obsolescence. So you're dealing with that. How do you
approach it?
How do I approach that? Because that's something that keeps some people up at night.
Yeah. So a Cape Cod, I refer to as a story and a half. So I kind of classify all houses into story, 1 story, 1.5, 2 story, or 2.5. So this is a 1.5 story house, right? And most Cape Cods that were built during that time period, whether it was in Louisville or somewhere else, usually they don't have return side ductwork on the second floor. So there's only supply air ducts that are pushing that air to the second floor. There's nothing to pull that hot air back down to the air conditioner and cool it back off. Every once in a while, you'll find like one floor return that might be upstairs on that second floor. Most of the time, it's only like 1, 2, or 3 supply ducts pushing air up there. So the way that you can approach this is like, is there room for me to run a return duct up to the second floor to get that hot air out of there in the summertime, pull it back down to the system that's probably located in the basement to cool that back off and circulate it throughout the house? Or can I insulate the second floor better and air seal it so that it's more comfortable without having to mess with the ductwork? Most of the time, it's going to be like a what-if scenario, right? So what if you're doing a big renovation on the house? Well, if you're doing a big renovation, then you have the opportunity to kind of do more insulation work.
I do, yes.
Maybe create a chase where you can run a duct from the basement up to the second floor. But what if you're already living in the house and you just want to make it more comfortable? Well, in that situation, you're probably going to have to insulate the second floor better. So with a Cape Cod style house, you have attic facing walls on 2 sides generally, because the second floor is a smaller footprint than the first floor. Right. So you have a smaller footprint on the second floor, and these short walls that face attic space are called knee walls. Now, if you think about most exterior walls in the house, in the summertime, it's 70, 75 degrees inside your house. It could be 80, 90, 100 outside. So you have a 10 to 20 degree temperature difference, right? Across those knee walls, you are on attic space. And that attic could be 120, 130, 140 degrees. So you have way more temperature difference between the second floor of the house of a Cape Cod and the attic than you do between the house and the outside. So those knee walls really need to be insulated a lot better than a normal exterior wall, Or you can basically say, okay, here's the roof line of this Cape Cod style house. They're almost always just a gable roof.
Right.
You can open up the ceilings on the second floor if you're doing a big renovation and spray foam the roof line from the underside, from peak down to soffit to the top plate of the first floor, and completely encapsulate and seal off that attic space. When you do that, those small...
Sorry, one minor question about that. What vendor takes care of that?
The insulation contractor. So you have to have somebody do the demo of the drywall and the plaster.
Yeah, obviously.
And then you get an insulation contractor to do the spray foam insulation.
Okay, so is the adult supervision the HVAC technician?
The adult supervision.
Like, in other words, who's going to make sure that do you audit that?
I will come and inspect that. Yeah, I mean,
Okay, so that's where I'm thinking
Yeah.
about, like, who makes sure that is.
It's done properly.
So I know that you're going to recommend a prescription, but you do the follow up to say,
Yeah.
okay, this was done right. That's what I meant by adult supervision.
Yeah. So whether it's me on site in person or remotely via, FaceTime or whatever, there's different apps that you can use to inspect remotely, but making sure that insulation is done properly is really important, especially when you're conditioning an attic space like I'm talking about. So making the second floor of a Cape Cod more comfortable, you could address it with ductwork, or you could address it by insulating, the roof deck and encapsulating that attic space. So instead of having 120 to 140 degree attic space behind those knee walls, now it's the same temperature as the rest of the house. So you don't have that dramatic difference that's making you uncomfortable in the summertime and the wintertime.
And if you weren't going to be tearing out, or you're living in the house, the budget's not there, this week or this month or this year to do the full demo and renovate and encapsulate, what other options could there be, or how would like a window AC unit efficiency compared to a mini split?
Yeah. So
work?
window AC is certainly a good Band-Aid for the issue. I mean, it's like if you have a cut on your arm, instead of just, getting it stitched up or whatever, you just kind of hold your hand over it. It's going to keep bleeding to a certain extent, right? So you can certainly get a window AC, and if people don't have the money to afford to do all the insulation work, then absolutely go and do that. There's going to be an ongoing cost associated with using that, but they're generally pretty energy efficient. What you could do besides foaming the roof deck is get behind those knee walls and install what's called an air barrier. So if you've got attic facing wall, here's your roof deck. This wall right here, usually in those older houses, didn't have any insulation at all. And if there's no attic access to get behind this wall, you really need to cut one. So whether you come in from the knee wall or you come in from below, from a room below, getting in here and installing insulation in that knee wall, and then I would recommend taking like 1 inch or 2 inch thick foam board and installing it on the back side of the framing to provide an air barrier and keep that hot air from circulating through the insulation. The other way that you could do it is by making an access here, coming in with a spray foam contractor and just foaming the back side of the knee wall all the way down to the ceiling of the floor, the story below you. The other thing that you'll find is a lot of times this knee wall, so here's the room, this knee wall sits on top of the floor joist perpendicularly, and the floor joists are open to those attic spaces as well. So blocking off each of those openings where the floor goes from the attic underneath that second floor makes a big difference too. So those are easier things than taking out all the drywall and everything.
See, I love that. And so this is what you get on the Investor Tribe podcast.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get where else can you get this?
Behind the scenes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you cannot get this information anywhere else except when you're on the Investor Tribe podcast. When you're an investor that want to learn about not only how to get in to real estate, how to protect your asset. Because over time, the attrition, and you can even speak to this, the attrition typically comes from sometimes the condition of the property.
Yeah.
If it's ineffectual and you're dealing with properties that are lower quality and their light bill or their utility bill rivals their rent.
Yeah.
That is problematic, and you're gonna have turnover. You're gonna get turnover really fast.
Or you're constantly fighting like mold or mildew showing up in your house, or different parts of the building degrading, and bugs and pests and stuff like that. A lot of those problems go back to moisture issues, and so the core of building science really revolves around managing moisture properly. So, as a real estate investor, whenever I would buy properties, I would always look at it from a different angle because of my background. And I would look for these issues that could become bigger issues down the road, whether it was like bathrooms not having properly vented exhaust fans to get that moisture from the shower back out. I rented to college kids a lot.
Not terminating in the attic and
Yes.
terminating out of the building.
Out
And
of
so
the attic.
all that, yeah. So that's I totally agree with that. So what we're going to do right now is just get to our sponsor, and you're our sponsor. So we're going to have you go right into the camera and give us a
Tell us about Home Comfort Advisor.
yeah. Go for it.
So I got a YouTube channel that's called Home Comfort Advisors, and I just started this a few months ago, and it's meant to teach homeowners, real estate professionals, and tradesmen the underlying causes of common home comfort issues and why kind of homes degrade and fail over time and how to fix them. So it's at homecomfortadvisors.com. There's also an online course that's just releasing at the end of 2024. It's also called Home Comfort Advisor. You can find that at myhomecomfortadvisor.com. And follow along with the YouTube channel. I also have an IG page. It's the same thing at homecomfortadvisors.com. And you can email me if you need to at eric@myhomecomfortadvisor.com.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, it is interesting that you hear from different investors how they look at properties.
Yeah.
And I've had different mentors and different people say what the first thing they look at is, and a lot of times it has to do with their background.
Yeah.
Have a guy that had a tree business. He said that's the first thing he looks for is trees.
How close they are to the house.
How close are they to the house? How much does it cost me to get them out of here?
Yeah.
Are they hanging over the neighbor's property?
Yep.
And then you were talking about the unvented bathrooms and without exhaust fans or things that are improperly vented or moisture issues. Grading, yep.
Grading issues are huge, especially in high density parts of the city. You got houses really close together, and you've got downspouts just dumping right next to the foundation of the house right next to you. So how do you mitigate that problem? So these are kind of things that I look at, like how am I going to prevent this house from degrading over time? If there's already moisture issues, how can I alleviate that issue? And if it's not easily fixable or it's not in the budget to run a perimeter drain or fix that problem the right way, I'm not buying it, because I would hate to flip a house, renovate it, turn it over to somebody else, knowing that there's some kind of an underlying issue that I didn't address, right?
I like that, and I this question is in alignment with that. What are the misconceptions that investors have about the building performance and minimizing the risk?
I think, frankly, it's just a complete lack of awareness for most investors. Like most investors, probably, like I said, they know the numbers. They don't understand moisture management. They don't understand building science. So they may understand that you're supposed to put a bath fan in a bathroom that has a bathtub or a shower, but they don't understand like how it's supposed to be vented. They don't realize that you can't take a box of 25-foot long flexible, vent and attach it and just run it and snake it all over the attic and it's magically going to push the air. It doesn't work that way. So it's just understanding things need to be done in the right way. It's not about just putting lipstick on a pig, because you get that a lot. People are more concerned about the type of countertops that they have and the cabinets and the flooring type and all this stuff. But if you're not fixing the underlying structure, the foundation, the framing, the moisture management, the vapor barriers and stuff like that, it's going to create problems down the road. And even if you can't see it, you're going to sell it to somebody else. There's like an integrity issue, I think. So
Talk about it.
You kind of
talk about it.
So if you're aware of it and you don't fix it because you know that it's not going to get inspected and it's not going to get found by a home inspector before you sell because it's getting covered up, I think that's a clear integrity issue. And I hope that the real estate investing industry can come to an agreement that let's do things the right way. Let's not cover things up for the sake of saving a few bucks.
Let's do the right thing and do things the right way.
Yeah.
So can you speak to, no one's watching. So do you know anybody? No, but can you talk about an instance where someone really dropped the ball on that?
As an investor or just any situation?
Just any situation where maybe you had an observation, you were brought in too late.
Yeah. So I've been involved with a ton of big custom home renovations that went wrong after the fact, and so like this is pretty prevalent in the new construction industry as well, and with professional remodelers, they generally don't have a whole lot more awareness than real estate investors do. So there's been a couple of situations where I get called into a big custom home. It could be $1 million house, it could be whatever. But there's been situations where they'll do a massive renovation. They've got the house is all done. I got a perfect one for you actually. In Prospect, there was a giant house in Prospect that was on the Ohio River. They did a massive renovation on this house, and they didn't understand how the way that they framed this house basically was allowing a ton of air from outside to get in between the first and second floor. And this is no normal house, but they basically built it with metal framing in between the floors. And so what happened was in the wintertime, when we had a really cold streak back in 2009, the ice storm and stuff, a bunch of air came in between the first and second floor because they didn't frame it and block and insulate it properly. And it froze the water pipes, and the water pipes burst and flooded this house. Well, this house had like original wood flooring from like somewhere in Europe that cost an ungodly amount of money, and there was all kinds of custom features. So they brought me in as part of like trying to figure out why this failed like this and how to fix it. And so I told them what to do and everything. And but it was just a massive, massive failure from the architects and the builders standpoint, where they didn't recognize these things when they were building the house. And then when they remodeled the house, it wasn't addressed either. So it ended up causing, however many hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage to this particular house. That's one of the most glaring examples. And then they fixed the house, and then somehow a year or two later it burned down, and I don't know what happened there, but.
What?
Right.
You never know.
It's like a $10 million house is gone.
Wow.
But if I was going to build a house, so I've built some houses before that were basically just tear down rebuilds. And I did traditional 2x4 construction, air sealed the framing all together before I added the insulation, which I usually use a blown in cellulose product. It's like a dense packed cellulose. And then the outside sheathing, I use zip wall sheathing. So it's like an OSB that has kind of a Tyvek water resistant barrier built into it, but you don't have to add another, you don't have to add a rain screen on top of it. So I use zip walls, 2x4s, and then blown in cellulose. And then for like foundation walls and rim joists, I'll use spray foam insulation. Yeah, so, and then just make sure that the heating cooling system is sized properly and you got your good exhaust fans piped out of the house and stuff like that. But in our climate zone, we don't really have a huge need to have super insulated houses because it doesn't get super, super cold for any length of time here. And it's not like scorchingly hot like Florida or Arizona or Texas. So we're in a kind of it's called a mixed humid climate zone here.
So what I wanted to do, Eric, was just kind of ask you a little bit about what was the most challenging property you ever inspected, and how did you resolve that? Like, how did that end out?
Man, you caught me on the spot. The most challenging inspection. So there's usually the most challenging inspections are large custom homes because they're so unique and there's so many different aspects to them. So it's like, I'm trying to think. The one that I just mentioned earlier was a pretty interesting one. There was another one that I got called to do. It was in Mississippi, actually. And this was early in my career. And it was a 25 or 30,000 square foot house and had 13 heating and cooling systems. And we only had basically 2 days to inspect the house. I brought one of my friends down with me that's a HVAC expert, and this house was just a complete mess. Like, it was, there's a well-known person lived there, and they had been living with this issue for some time, and they had tried to, they basically were having big moisture issues. And they had tried to fix it by spray foaming the roof deck and doing some different things, and they couldn't figure it out. So actually, we got called by a heating and cooling company that was trying to help them fix this issue to come down there and kind of do a big analysis and test all the HVAC systems and stuff. And man, that job took like, I don't know, 10 or 12 hours on day one and half of the next day to get through all the systems and test everything. And it was a really cool opportunity, and we ended up figuring out what the problem was. But I don't know if you want to hear what the problem was or not, but it took a while to figure out like how to present, here's what the problem is and here's how we recommend you go about fixing it, just because of the size and complexity of the house.
Wow. I mean, that's definitely fascinating.
But you able to get it. They were able. You figured out a solution for them.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Well, so the essence of the problem with this house is they didn't spray foam the roof deck correctly, and there was a giant overhang. They had a rear porch that was connected to the main attic, and that porch was like a massive 100-foot by 50-foot overhang of the back patio, right? What they didn't do was spray foam the floor of that overhang. So imagine you have a roof that's like this, and there's all kinds of, angles to it, but this part of the roof is still exposed to the outdoors and completely uninsulated. So all the heat and humidity and moisture and all that stuff was coming in through that overhang, getting into the attic, creating tons of moisture, mold, and then you had a bunch of heating cooling systems that were just way too big for this house, even despite that problem, just exacerbating the issue. So that was probably one of the craziest ones that I've done.
Okay, so curveball question. So the market is the market. When you think about what people demand in inventory, what people demand as far as construction type, location, all things being equal, choices are dictating what they do. Mm-hmm. What responsibility do you think the real estate investor community have to provide sustainable homes that are able to use? The example that I would like to use is a house that's pretty much made of Swiss cheese with very little insulation.
Yeah.
And your utility bills are now are going to rival your rent payment, and there are moisture issues abound. There's a lot of different dynamics. What is the market's responsibility? What is the real estate agent? You know where I'm going.
Yeah.
So what is the real estate investor community's responsibility, and what do you think government's responsibility would be in a lot of that? Because there is different varying opinions. So I definitely want to pick your brain on that.
So there are building codes that are in place for a reason. I don't agree with all the building codes that are in place. But there's an energy code that's part of the building code. And if you open up a house completely and you renovate it back to the studs, you're supposed to treat it like new construction. If you've been a real estate investor for a long time, you know that a lot of these houses don't actually get inspected unless they're calling for like mechanicals, right? So if you have to rewire the house is all opened up, then you're going to have to insulate it properly and everything else. But if you don't have to pull permits, a lot of times investors just kind of ignore that stuff, and they'll just... there has been more problems with flipped houses, I think, in the last 10 years than there has been with, new construction houses. And that may seem obvious, but if you're renovating these houses and you have the opportunity to make them new construction like, and you don't, and you're actually making them worse for the next guy, then I think the real estate investor has a responsibility to, be aware of the potential issues that you can cause. And I really want to focus on educating people on the health and safety aspect of things first and primarily, and then just knowing the basics of like where you should air seal houses, how they should be insulated, best bang for your buck, and the whole oversizing of heating cooling systems issues. If you can get through that kind of stuff, you're going to solve a lot of problems. From a real estate agent's point of view, I think that a lot of them don't know construction either. They don't know how things function in houses other than rudimentary cosmetic ways. Is it their responsibility to know building science? Probably not, but I think they should also be able to recognize common health and safety issues. Like if you go into a house, you're showing a house to somebody, whether it's an investor or they're going to be a homeowner, and you see that they have an old furnace, and that old furnace has a bunch of white residue and rust and stuff on the flue pipe. Well, that's a pretty sure sign that the flue is not drafting properly, and there could be carbon monoxide issues. So you might want to have a heating cooling contractor do a little bit more investigating there, right? So just looking for the signs. So a lot of what I teach is like recognizing the symptoms and then understanding the underlying causes for those symptoms.
And so is it worth it now? So now that I know what I know, is it still worth it for the investor to, you just up my cost by 15% to 20%? And that, I'm playing the contrarian here because it's just, so there's a responsibility on one side, and on the other side, affordable housing isn't affordable.
Yeah.
As we often say in our business, right? So where does that, how do you balance that out?
I would challenge you that an unhealthy house is also unaffordable because it's going to cause health and safety issues with the occupants of the house. So whether you're spending more money on your utility bill or you're spending more money at the doctor's office or on allergy medication or whatever, you want to live in a healthy environment, right? You don't want to it should be part of your budget is what I'm saying. You should understand that if I'm looking at an older house that has an old gas appliance in it, there's a chance that it might have a cracked heat exchanger, or there might be a gas leak or a flue pipe issue. And just look at it when you're doing your due diligence, when you're doing your inspection, look for these signs of improper flue draft. And it's a visual thing that you can see. The little grommets on top of the water heater, if it's a gas water heater, there's supposed to be a red one and a blue one. A lot of times those are melted completely off because it's backdrafting, the water heater's backdrafting. So that's a sign of a bigger issue. So just paying attention to stuff like that. I'm not telling you to spend 10 or 15 or 20% more on each one of your flips. I don't think you would. I just think recognizing it and putting it in your budget before you buy the house so that you know that you're not neglecting something that could kill somebody later or could be some kind of a big issue for the occupants later is important.
Well, a lot of great information. So it's, and then, things to look out for, and appreciate your class. I'm interested in learning more about it since, because there's, we're investors, we don't know the building code necessarily inside and out. We have contractors that are supposed to know it and may tell us some things. And
you rely on their perceived expertise.
Yes.
Perceived expertise. And you can vet them out all you want to, but at the end of the day, you're trusting somebody else that they know what they're talking about. But I'm going to challenge you and everybody else that you should understand a little bit more about this as well so that you're not flying blind.
That's true. That's true. And so there is many ways that people can reach out to us.
Yes,
right?
And check out multiple podcasts. New one drops every week.
And every Wednesday at 1 p.m. And they can find us at IMB Tribe on Instagram. They can find us on X. They can find us on YouTube. And you can also find us on Facebook. And so every Wednesday, 1 p.m., we are we want to thank you for your time today. We want to thank you, Eric, for coming out, hanging out with us. Will you join us back? Will you come back
Happy
to us? Man, thank you so much. And signing off, this is Milton Ali.
And I'm Hampton Scurlock.
And we'll catch you on the flip side of the Investor Tribe.